John Candy, I Like Me is a very warm and affectionate look back at the late comedian and actor. Name a person whose work you like, and they are probably in this movie talking about liking John Candy. I Like Me. Alonso, what's it about? Take it away.
I'm a Mog. Half man, half dog.
Gus Polinski, polka king of the Midwest.
Del Griffith, director of sales, shower curtain ring division.
This is a lovable guy.
Yeah, this is directed by Colin Hanks, so obviously he had, access to the people you would want to hear from in a John Candy documentary, along with Candy's wife and his two children. It's just a really lovely remembrance of this guy who kind of came out of nowhere in Canada and wound up, becoming part of the very influential Second City Toronto troupe, and moving on to SCTV and then into movie stardom and becoming a very, very big deal. All the while kind of being haunted by the fact that his own father died in his mid-30s, and sort of thinking that he, having to deal with that loss at a very young age, and also having to deal with the idea of his own time being, limited. And as it turns out, he did die at the age of 43. But, before then, he left behind an indelible set of film and TV appearances, and very close friendships with people who are struggling to come up with anything less than laudatory to say about him. Like Bill Murray, the best he can come up with was they did a play reading once where John kind of like milked it really hard. That's it. That's all anybody's got. That it's like he was a devoted husband and a great dad, and a loving friend and generous, and a talented performer and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So, it is a lot of praise, but he earns it. And, it is, I always hope that at some point people who grow up on Home Alone find SCTV. And I hope that this documentary sends more people to finding SCTV, because that was a comedy cornerstone for me growing up in the 80s. And I don't know that it gets enough credit outside of like nerdy comedy circles, but it's brilliantly funny. And it's where John Candy and Catherine O'Hara and Andrea Martin and Eugene Levy and Joe Flaherty and, Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis and all these people, Harold Ramis, Martin Short. Thank you. Yes. That came out of that. And so, it is as much of a comedy powerhouse as, I think Dan Aykroyd talks about SNL and Monty Python. And, this was that kind of core group of influential comedians who would go on to do, world-changing work. So this is a well put together. I think structurally it's done very neatly in terms of jumping back and forth in time. It is ultimately a doc about a showbiz figure that everybody likes and that everybody in the movie likes. And so there's only so much you can do with that, but Colin Hanks does it well.
Yeah, when you see all those SCTV cast members all in one place, it is totally mind-boggling. Like, oh, right, there's like 10 or a dozen people whose work has gone on. We look at Limmer's in the Building, co-stars Martin Short. Andrea Martin's had a key supporting role in that. So it's just really mind-boggling. Nice to see them all in one place. Yeah.
Eugene Levy.
Yeah. Eugene, exactly. Yeah.
Played Steve Martin in the movie version.
That is true, and that's really funny. It's nice to see them all in one place, and it makes you realize just how many movies John Candy was in. I mean, we think of the key ones like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and Stripes, Home Alone, of course, but like Uncle Buck. And then even admittedly, he did a whole bunch of stuff toward the end that was not very good. But because he was this extremely nice guy and never wanted to say no to anybody and never wanted to let anybody down, he said yes. Just
when Dan Aykroyd is one of your oldest friends, you're going to get stuck being in nothing but trouble. That's just sort of how it goes.
Yeah. And so it is a very, very affectionate look back. And, it has been several decades, like 3 decades or so since he died. But, talking to his children, it's as fresh as yesterday. And that emotion feels so real. And people who really, really loved him, they still, miss him deeply. The one complaint I have about this is that the score is super overbearing. The music is very hand-holdy and kind of sentimental in a way that seems redundant. Like, we're talking about somebody who was incredibly talented and well liked and was hardworking and brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. and that early loss is a tragedy. So to spell that out, to hammer that home with the music, it swells over and over again. And it's like, as you would say, okay, movie.
Yeah, like trust the material. You know, I think you're right. It does kind of put too fine a point on it on more than one occasion. But I guess maybe I just tuned it out after a while and was ignoring it and just waiting for who was going to talk next. But yeah, I think like all the talking head interviews are great and really insightful. Like Tom Hanks talking about the process of making Splash and kind of coming to understand that Candy wasn't there to steal scenes. He was there to play. He was there for the two of them to like do stuff. And once he got comfortable with that, then he got into it and they could throw things back and forth and go really nuts with it. But Hanks goes into that movie, you know, a relative newcomer at that point and a huge SCTV fan. So the fact that he's in a movie with John Candy and Eugene Levy is like kind of intimidating for him until he realizes, oh, no, this is now a license to kind of, you know, have fun with it and improv a little and throw things around. Macaulay Culkin has a great insight that I had not thought of, which is that he's like, yeah, people think about me or Molly Ringwald as the sort of consummate John Hughes performer. John Candy was in 9 of his movies. Yeah. Which blew my mind because I had forgotten about Only the Lonely, which they don't really talk about, but you do get a clip of Maureen O'Hara like over the closing credits. And, you know, all of these other movies that the Great Outdoors that were somehow sort of Hughes, either he wrote them or produced them or whatever. And yeah, like the two of them had, you know, that's the director star relationship that really pops in the Hughes oeuvre even more than, you know, the people we might think.
Right, the Brat Pack people, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, but he's so reliable, you know. You just like he's there, he's always there, but you don't appreciate what he contributes, so it's easy to forget. And then Macaulay Culkin also had that really great anecdote about how when he was a little kid doing Home Alone, that John Candy kind of sensed, you know, that things were not great for him at home, and before the stories of his father, the Culkin's father, being a monster to them, like. John Candy could tell and would check in with him and treated him like an equal and a partner and really cared about him. And that was very telling as to his character. Yeah. And it again, it's not warts at all in any way. The negative here is that he treated his body horribly. Yeah. And that came from insecurity. Ironically, it came from fear of dying young and wanting to stay viable. But then he would sabotage his own body in ways that would make that, you know, that prophecy come true, which is very sad.
And also that, you know, they talk, he even says like, Hollywood wants me big. Hollywood wants me fat. This is the role that I am. I'm the funny fat guy now. And so I have to remain this. And, you know, and it's true. Like if you are a larger person, people are going to like, bring it up all the time and think that they have the right to because they're so concerned about your health, which apparently he super hated and good on him for that. But then also, if you make a career as that guy, then you are expected to stay that guy. You know, like I think now you see these people who had been sort of the funny fat guy and then they discover Manjaro or whatever. And it's like, oh, what do we do with you now? I'm not really sure, you know? Yeah. So yeah, he kind of felt the need to sort of maintain that. I had actually heard Macaulay Culkin tell that story at one of the Home Alone screenings last year that he was doing live. But yeah, he talks about how Candy would be like, you okay? Things good? You all right? You know, like but the thing about Uncle Buck, especially how he dealt with Culkin and that's Gabby Hoffman, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, as like, just as adults, as fellow performers, he wasn't condescending. He wasn't like, you know, blowing them off or whatever. And you know, and Culkin to this day obviously still remembers and cherishes that working experience.
Yeah, it's a nice movie. It's a nice movie that's appreciative of his career and all he brought to the culture and what a good guy he was. So a lot of docs tend to be kind of bummers. We're talking about another documentary today. It's going to be a bummer. So if you want just something kind of like a nice escape and a nice remembrance to, you know, your own youth and your own movies that you liked as a kid, this is a great way to do that. I will say a 7.8. Like it's just really nice and it's, you know, well sourced and the anecdotes are delightful. So.
Yeah, I'm a 7.4 out of 10.
Interesting. Oh, I thought that you would like it more than I did.
No, I mean, I enjoyed watching it, but I just think in terms of, in terms of degree of difficulty, it's not really doing anything with the rules of documentary filmmaking, or even maybe even I almost feel like if you're Colin Hanks making this movie and you've got all these people in your Rolodex, you can ask tougher questions or more. I don't know. It felt to me that it was like, he could have gotten more out of all of the parade of legends who show up to talk about how great Candy was. And I'm not saying they had to shit talk him. I'm just saying, I think it could have been more insightful at times, but what's there is great. And, if it encourages you, again, go watch SCTV reruns. They're amazing. Or to revisit any of his films, like the better ones, obviously, then, absolutely go do it.
Yeah. John Candy, I Like Me, streaming on Prime Video. Go check it out.